Roger Fortson, a 23-year-old senior airman, was speaking to his girlfriend on FaceTime inside his apartment on May 3, 2024, when he heard a knock on his door. He grabbed his gun and went to respond. But what happened next was beyond his imagination. An officer stood at his door, and before Roger could understand anything, he fired at him 6 times, claiming his life. But why did he have to lose his life like this? What was his crime? And why did the officer target him on that day? Okaloosa Sheriff's Department released the disturbing body cam footage which showed the incident scene by scene. And it's hard to not sympathize with the young man. Let's take a look at the incident as it unfolded that day. 23-year-old Roger Fortson was an ambitious man with big dreams. He lived in Okaloosa, was in a steady relationship, and had enlisted in the U.S. Air Force in November 2019. He was working there as a senior airman at the Special Operations Wing at Hurlburt Field, Florida, and lived alone in an apartment complex 8 kilometers away from his workplace. Even though he had shifted out, he shared a very strong bond with his family and was close to his siblings. Okaloosa Sheriff's Department released the footage after the unfortunate incident in May, which showed the moments leading up to the untimely demise of the senior airman. On the day of the incident, the sheriff's office was responding to complaints of some sort of disturbance at the apartment complex. When the deputy arrived, he walked straight into the admin building and entered the office. He asked a man about the incident and he told him that he didn't know what was going on, so the deputy walked out and found a woman.
When an Okaloosa County deputy pulled into this Florida apartment complex, it took about 3 minutes for him to enter an office.
What's going on? I'm not sure.
And connect with an unidentified woman about an alleged disturbance.
He asked her about the disturbance, and the woman said that it happened frequently, and at this point, was getting out of hand. According to reports, the same woman tells the deputy she previously walked by the apartment and heard yells and a slap, but added she wasn't sure where it came from. When the officer asked her if she knew where the commotion originated, she took him to the elevator and led him toward apartment 1401. She believed that the man responsible for the disturbance lived there.
Are they fighting or something?
She eventually took him to the unit 1401, where she believes the fighting originated.
It was Roger's apartment and he was inside, alone, FaceTiming with his girlfriend. The officer knocked on the door and shouted his identity twice. Roger opened the door after some time. He still had the phone on him. However, on the other hand, he had a weapon.
Sheriff's office, open the door!
After the deputy identifies himself twice, Fortson opens up the door with a gun visible by his side, but not raised.
The officer asked him to step aside. After that split second, he noticed the gun and fired at Roger before he had a chance to explain himself.
A split second later,
Step out.
6 shots are fired, and the 23-year-old's life is over.
The deputy entered the apartment and took a quick look. He then asked Roger to drop his weapon as he lay on the floor. Roger said he didn't have it on him.
Drop the gun! Drop the gun!
And then the deputy called for help. Roger was immediately rushed to the hospital, where the doctor pronounced him dead. His family members were informed next, who were confused because they never knew him to be involved in any crime. He believed in and lived a very peaceful life. As investigators began working on the case, they released the body cam footage, and it went viral overnight and was covered by various media outlets.
Newly released body cam video shows the moments leading up to a deadly shooting of a 23-year-old airman. Roger Fortson was shot to death by a Florida deputy while inside his apartment. Fortson's family says they had the wrong man in the wrong apartment.
After the news went viral, people only asked for one thing: justice for Roger Fortson. Roger's family made the first appearance in front of the news reporters days after his demise and spoke about their loss. Attorney Benjamin Crump was fighting the case on Roger's behalf and hoped to get him justice. He previously worked in other high-profile cases, including George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. During the press conference, Crump strongly claimed that the deputy had the wrong apartment. He already had the details of the complaint, and on top of that, the woman had claimed that it was getting out of hand. So, when he found Roger clutching the gun, he fired at him without thinking twice. Crump claimed that Roger wasn't responsible for any violence.
I mean, the police came in, and when they busted in his apartment, they saw him with a gun, and for whatever reason, they thought he was a bad guy, but he was a good guy.
Crump added that they were holding the Okaloosa Sheriff's Department responsible for the mishap and wanted them to accept the blame and help Roger find justice.
Okaloosa Sheriff's Department need to own up to this. They need to give him the dignity and the respect he so richly deserves.
Crump addressed Roger as the best America had to offer and said that a patriot like Roger didn't have to leave the world in such a brutal way. He was a patriot. He was a U.S. Airman, Special Ops. He was fighting for our way of life. He was fighting for everybody, Mr. Crump said. On the other hand, Roger's mother, Chantimeki Fortson, broke down when she heard Crump speak about the moment his son lost his life. The heartbroken mother said that her son meant the world to her, and now he was snatched away from her. "My baby was my everything," she said.
He shot up. My baby was shot up.
She claimed that the sheriff's office was hiding something and requested them to tell the truth. She believed that her son could do no wrong to anyone.
Tell the truth about my son. I know my son did not do anything to you guys.
She also requested the authorities to clear Roger's name because he didn't need to leave the world labeled as a criminal despite serving in the military for so many years. She said, "I know my son did not do anything to you guys. If he scared you, or if you guys wasn't trained properly, I apologize," she said. "But please clean my baby's reputation." When the reporters spoke to Fortson's mother and his attorney Benjamin Crump, they asked if the sheriff's office of Okaloosa ever acknowledged that they got in the wrong apartment. Crump said that they had heard nothing of that sort from them. Rather, the officers were making it seem like Roger was the culprit.
The Okaloosa Sheriff's Department has not owned up to the fact that they went to the wrong apartment, as if he did something wrong, as if he was committing some crime. He did nothing.
Mr. Crump accused police of trying to justify unjustifiable, excessive use of force. Roger's mother raised an important question. According to the sheriff's office, they were responding to a disturbance. When they went to check Roger's apartment, he was alone and on a call. There was no sign of violence or disturbance there, so why did the officer fire at him?
There's a lot of doubt in my mind because Roger was the only person in his apartment. They said they was answering to a disturbance. Was he fighting himself?
Crump also claimed that Roger's gun was registered, and he was not possessing it illegally. On top of that, he wasn't even using it. However, when the sheriff's office held a press conference to address the unfortunate incident, Okaloosa County Sheriff Eric Aiden continued to claim that they were at the right apartment. The sheriff's office said the deputy reacted in self-defense after he encountered a 23-year-old man armed with a gun, and after the deputy had identified himself as law enforcement. He continued to point out that the deputy announced his identity multiple times, so there was no need for Roger to be suspicious about the person standing at his door. He added that the officer didn't cover the peephole, and Roger could actually see the person in his uniform before he opened the door. So, there was no misunderstanding, and he didn't need to carry the gun with him. What we do know at this time is that the deputy did announce himself, not once, but twice, Aiden said. Mr. Fortson's comments indicate that he did acknowledge it was law enforcement at the door, and he arrived at the door with a firearm in his hand. Deputy knocked on the correct door. He did not cover the peephole or otherwise obscured its view in any way. They also announced that if they were wrong, they would never let Roger's death go to waste and would punish the deputy responsible for this incident.
I told Mr. Fortson's family this afternoon that they have my word. If this shooting is found to be unjustified, their son's name will be fully vindicated and justice will be served.
To achieve complete transparency, Aiden claimed that the investigation would be thorough and all aspects would be properly scrutinized.
I want to assure you that we are not hiding, covering up, or taking action that would result in a rush to judgment of Mr. Fortson or our deputy.
However, Roger's family continued to claim that the deputy was at the wrong apartment and wrongfully fired at Roger. We remain adamant that the police had the wrong apartment, as Roger was on the phone with his girlfriend for a substantial amount of time leading up to the shooting, and no one else was in the apartment, Fortson's family said in a statement following the release of the footage. Addressing the body cam footage, they added more questions to their claims that had no answers. It is very troubling that the deputy gave no verbal commands and shot multiple times within a split second of the door being opened, kiling Roger. As the officer didn't tell Roger to drop the weapon before shooting, was the officer trained to give verbal warnings? Did the officer try to initiate life-saving measures? Was the officer trained to deal with law-abiding citizens who are registered gun owners? The military also wanted answers from the police department after losing their airman. They said that it was very unfortunate to see someone from their team in such a disturbing situation, especially when they weren't involved in any wrongdoings.
We certainly never want to see our airmen or any military member or any part of our DoD family be put into a situation like this.
Meanwhile, Roger's family grieved the loss of their beloved son. He had 5 siblings and was very close to his 10-year-old sister. His mother remembered him as a dedicated and ambitious young man who never feared chasing his dreams and making them come true. And now, his siblings would follow in his footsteps.
He wanted everybody happy.
He was a caretaker for you, but he also was trying to show a better path for his family.
He was a role model.
Investigators managed to retrieve portions of the video call and released 4 minutes of the footage from the incident. Roger was on the call with his girlfriend, and the content showed what happened after he was fired at.
The video shows what appears to be the ceiling of an apartment as a man, presumably Fortson, can be heard groaning and saying, "I can't breathe." Another man can be heard telling him, "Do not move, stop moving."
According to Crump, they were working on the case based on the information provided by Roger's girlfriend, alongside the police body cam footage. As she was on the call, she was the only witness who knew what happened during the incident. The friend said the airman heard a knock on his apartment door and asked who was there, but received no response. He then heard a second, very aggressive knock, but did not see anyone when he looked through the peephole. At this point, she said, Roger had grown concerned because the knocks sounded like trouble. So he fetched his gun before going back into the living room and opening the door. As Fortson returned to his living room, the witness said police burst through the door, saw that the resident was armed and shot him 6 times. And then, she heard the officer asking Roger to stop moving, and that help was arriving.
Do not move, stop moving! Stop moving! Hang on, man, we gotta get this coming for you, don't move!
And then, the deputy was heard speaking to his peers. Presumably speaking to others, the deputy then says, "We're good. He had a gun since he opened the door." The deputy is heard shouting, but much of it is inaudible. After help arrived, other people could be heard checking Roger's wounds and speaking about his condition. Another person can later be heard detailing Fortson's wounds, saying, "We've got 3 gunshot wounds, 1 exit," before another voice says, "Yeah, he's shut up." But the EMS team was eventually heard saying that Roger had 6 bullet wounds. He died after a short period. So, what do experts have to say about this case? Ian Adams, an assistant professor who studies criminology at the University of South Carolina, scrutinized the body cam footage and said that the deputy firing at Roger before understanding the situation wasn't justifiable. The speed of the shooting is pretty intense. It's happening very, very fast. Adams was also a police officer and had a good grasp of the protocols. He claimed that having a gun at the scene does not warrant firing at the person holding it. The presence of a gun enhances the risk, but mere presence is not at all justification for using deadly force, Adams said. He added that owning guns was very common in the United States, and if the sight of a gun warranted such a reaction from law enforcement, many more people would lose their lives every day. We also live in a nation with more guns than people. If the mere presence of a gun were the standard for reasonable use of deadly force, we would be awash with police shootings, he said. Chuck Wexler is an executive director of the Police Executive Research Forum, which is based in Washington and focuses on critical issues in policing. According to him, the involvement of guns had changed the way the police took action in critical situations. This is a tragedy on so many levels, for everyone, for the family, and for the officer. Guns accelerate decision-making, and that's the challenge here, he said. On the other hand, a former police officer and a criminal justice professor at the University of Missouri St. Louis, David Klinger, claimed that officers were not bound to give a warning before applying brutal force in such situations. as the matter of a second can be the difference between life and death for the officers and civilians involved. But if pausing to give a warning or a verbal command is going to increase the risk of a deadly threat, then it isn't feasible, he said. Roger's peers also said that he was wronged in this case. Scott Lacey, a former Air Force Special Operations Command officer with years of experience, worked at the same squadron as Roger, and believed that he was a victim. When he just opens the door, sees him with a gun, and unloads 6 rounds on the Senior Airman, to me that just screams unjust right away, said Lacey, who spent time as an Arizona state trooper after leaving the military. The airman didn't raise his gun and showed no kind of hostile intent. Lacey was deeply moved by this unfair incident, and he called his peers to take a stand and do something to ensure that Roger got justice. Funnily, the Okaloosa Sheriff's Department has been involved in such blunders in the past, and this is not their first time. A woman reported being harassed when the officers went to serve a warrant at her house in 2019. They reportedly asked her to strip off her clothes and stand naked in front of them. She wasn't charged eventually, but she remembered the harassment and reported it. As of 2024, the case is still ongoing. Her lawyer asked the higher-ups to check this department for further clarification. I think the Department of Justice needs to take a look at what's happening with the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office, said Kevin Anderson, a lawyer for Griffin. As of May 2024, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement is investigating Roger's case. The sheriff, responsible for Roger's death, wasn't identified and was quickly put on administrative leave by the sheriff's office. According to official reports, no determination has been made as to whether the deputy's actions were justified or not. Roger's body was returned to his family after an autopsy. They arranged a funeral for him on May 10th, Friday, at New Birth Missionary Baptist Church in Stonecrest, Georgia. His peers were scheduled to fly there to attend it. Roger's dear ones and well-wishers are hoping that this case won't end up like the thousands of others gathering dust sitting in a pile, and praying that Roger gets justice as soon as possible. So, what did you think of the case? Do you think the sheriff's office targeted the wrong person? Why do you think Roger was holding a gun when the deputy went to check his apartment? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel.